Alright guys, so with Star Trek Into Darkness on the horizon, I'm very excited for it this week, and so is my buddy John, the Flick Pick. We're going to tell you guys our thoughts on the first film by J.J. Abrams, Star Trek. I'll do my review first, and then you'll get his review second. My little ounce of Trekkiedom I've never really exposed to you guys before, but I actually was pretty into Star Trek when I was a kid. I loved the original series and the Next Generation series. I never got into any of the others, but I watched them with my family when I was a kid. Now since you're probably going to want to know what my thoughts on all the other films are, I'll tell you them as quickly as I possibly can. Star Trek the Motion Picture, a kind of boring movie that didn't really capture the feel of the original Star Trek series, but still had some awe-inspiring moments and some good performances. Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan, the best of the original films. Khan was excellent, it had a great suspenseful story, and it brought the original Star Trek roots and the feel of it back. Star Trek III The Search for Spock, directed by Leonard Nimoy, a pretty entertaining film, but with not the greatest fight scenes ever, a kind of hammy but fun Christopher Lloyd as the villain, but overall a pretty good Star Trek movie. Star Trek IV The Voyage Home, also directed by Leonard Nimoy, the one with the whales as most people refer to it, one of the best and one of the funniest Star Trek films. Look for a great scene with Spock and Kirk on a bus. Star Trek V The Final Frontier, William Shatner said, "Hey, I would like to direct a movie as well. Spock, you did it, and now I will." No, you can't. You actually suck. Star Trek V is the worst of the original films by far. I can't stand it, actually. It's terrible. Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, the director of Star Trek II came back. Great film, great send-off for these characters, a lot of fun. Look for a great performance by Christopher Plummer as Chang, the main villain. Moving into Next Generation, we had Star Trek Generations, a film that combined Next Generation Star Trek with Old Generation Star Trek. A fun film at times, not great, not the greatest villain in Malcolm McDowell, and a terrible, terrible ending that outraged fans, myself included, that was completely and stupidly unnecessary. Star Trek First Contact, directed by Jonathan Frakes, or Riker. Excellent film, best of the Next Generation films, one of the best Star Trek movies, had the Borg as the main villain, it was great. Star Trek Insurrection, a kind of boring and unnecessary film that felt like a TV episode stretched out, if you know what I'm talking about, yeah. Facelifts. And finally, Star Trek Nemesis. The best and most memorable thing about this movie is that Tom Hardy was featured as the villain clone of Patrick Stewart. Not the greatest movie, it was okay, but it wasn't a complete disaster. As James Lipton of Inside the Actors Studio says, "How quickly we have arrived at Star Trek." I don't know if you guys watch that show, I watch it all the time. Star Trek in 2009 was directed by J.J. Abrams, and it surprised a lot of people. The only thing it was really based off of was Star Trek. It was the characters from Star Trek, and that's all you know. And a lot of Trekkies were worried because it looked like they were straying away from various plot points of the original shows, and it was going to mess up the timeline, the continuity, and all kinds of stuff. I don't care about that, because this film successfully, in my mind, rebooted and revamped Star Trek for today's audiences, and J.J. Abrams re-injected energy into that wasn't there before, that was sorely lacking. I really hope he does that with Star Wars coming up soon. This film is an origin story, and you get your first looks at Kirk and Spock as kids, and as they grow older, and how they're both sort of wayward, and they're looking for something. They're looking for something to complete their lives, something they can devote their time to. And they find that in the Enterprise and in each other. And one of the greatest things about the original Star Trek show was that relationship between Kirk, Spock, and Bones, or McCoy. And in this film, that is recaptured so beautifully with all of these actors. They did such a good job at recreating the best parts of Star Trek. Although the stories of Star Trek were interesting and the special effects were cool, the best parts about those original Star Trek shows were the characters, their interactions with each other, and the fact that you loved those guys. And even if the mission they were on wasn't so interesting or fun, you enjoyed watching the characters because you cared about them, and that made the mission all the more exciting, even if it wasn't that great. And that's what J.J. Abrams realized with this movie, because he was able to successfully recreate those characters for today's audiences while still showing them love, and it was extremely exciting. Eric Bana plays Nero. He's this time-traveling villain who's taken people captive. He's looking for the Vulcan planet. He wants to destroy things, and he's got an agenda. If you haven't seen the film, I won't tell you too much about it, because it's fun to go into this movie without knowing that much. Just know that basically this is a really fun sci-fi movie that's actually really hilarious too, because J.J. Abrams also has a pretty good way of injecting humor into his movies without making it feel forced. There's this great scene where Kirk's hands get all bloated from some sort of injection that he gets, and that whole scene was just so out of the blue. I was cracking up. I remember the first time I saw it in theaters. So like I said, J.J. Abrams realized that what made the previous Star Trek films good, the ones that were good, and the show, were those characters, and he was able to successfully recreate that for today. And all the actors, Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Carl Urban, Zoe Saldana, Anton Yelchin, Simon Pegg. All these guys came together and were able to make a new Star Trek movie that successfully tributed that original series and the original movies, but also made it fresh and new for a new generation. And critics and people all praised the film alike, despite the fact that, of course, fans were like, oh, the continuity and this and that. Blah. It doesn't matter to me. It can't do the same thing forever. My review for Star Trek Into Darkness will probably be out this late Wednesday, early Thursday. Looking forward to that, but for now, guys, please enjoy my buddy the Flick Picks review, and if you liked his review, you can go check out his channel. I'll have the link for that in the description below. Thanks, guys, and enjoy John's review.
Hey there, guys, my name's John, this is the Flick Pick channel, and here's my take on Star Trek. Anyway, J.J. the Lens Flare Abrams 2009 Star Trek movie was like a shot of adrenaline into the arm of Star Trek. This movie re-energized the franchise and brought it to a new generation of fans that might be a little bit younger and not aware of it. You know, not everybody knows who Leonard Nimoy is, and I think that's a crime against humanity. And even if you're not a huge Trekkie, some people call them Trekkers, either way, if you're not a huge fanatic of the series, it reintroduces all of these characters to you for the first time, but it does a really good job at, telling you who these people are. There's character development. They get to the point. You're establishing these characters and you can really get behind them, and it doesn't take the whole movie to do so. And that's one of the things I really enjoyed about this movie is because it stayed true to these beloved characters. It gave you that origin story, and it did so within like the first 40 minutes of the movie. And most importantly, what the movie does is it goes into warp drive and you just get into the story. The movie stars Chris Pine as Captain Kirk and Zachary Quinto as Spock, and to me that duo of characters is what makes Star Trek so great. I mean, of course, then you have the badass Enterprise, but besides that, these characters are basically the heartbeat of this movie, and I think Chris Pine's performance in the movie is pretty damn good. After seeing him in a 2009 Star Trek movie, I really can't imagine anyone else, playing the role. I think he was like a good new generation William Shatner without the weird speech patterns, even though he does it one time in the movie. There's something about this movie I really like. I don't even sound like William Shatner, I sound like Nicolas Cage. And then you have Zachary Quinto in the movie who plays Spock, and talk about blowing a performance away. This guy nails every scene that he's in. I really buy him as Spock. He just has a great screen presence about him, and I really bought him being a Vulcan in the movie. And the thing I've always liked about Spock, and the thing that they do really well in this movie, is they really show how diverse his character is. He's half Vulcan, half human, and they blend that very well, because at times he's very emotional and he has a lot of aggression, but at other times he's very level-headed and makes the right call. And I thought this movie did a great job of showing that. Now, as far as the story and plot goes, at times it might get a little bit overly complicated, but you just have to take it for what it is. It's these guys up in the Enterprise, they're in space, they're fighting Eric Bana, his name is Nero in the movie. Hello, my name is Nero. It always made me laugh. And the movie's directed by J.J. Abrams, and with J.J. you usually get lens flare and a little bit of shaky cam, but in this movie it really worked. It felt like that new generation of filmmaking really played out well in this movie. Overall this movie's just a lot of fun. Visually it's awesome to look at. It has Leonard Nimoy coming back to play Spock, which is, that right there alone is 2 thumbs up. And the thing about J.J. Abrams' Star Trek is this movie could have failed so easily. There's so many things that they could have done wrong that just, pretty much ruined the pre-established franchise of Star Trek. But they redid it in such a way that it was creative, it was new, it was interesting. And for that, I'm gonna have to give Star Trek, the 2009 movie, an A. So anyway, guys, I'm John. This is the Flick Pick channel. That's my quick take on Star Trek. Live long and prosperous. I'll see you next time.